Welcome to Keep Your Thrive Alive. I'm Mark Mulligan, and this is the space where I share inspiration, tips and ideas to boost your mood, your energy and your well-being. Whenever I run workshops and we get to the point where we look at action planning, somebody will always say, I know what I should be doing, but I just can't seem to make myself do it. I fail over and over again. Why is it so difficult to change our behaviour, especially when we know that it's good for us? The thing that will make the biggest difference in changing your behaviour is motivation. However, the problem with motivation is that it tends to be in short supply, especially when we need it the most, particularly when you're stressed or tired. Today I'd like to share with you a technique to build your motivation reserves, almost like a muscle. I'd like to share with you 4 simple ways of tapping into your motivation so that changing your behaviour becomes effortless and sustainable. Firstly, let me share with you 2 types of motivation. The first is whether the motivation is extrinsic or intrinsic. This is whether the motivation comes from some external stimulus or because of how you feel when you're doing something. It's like the difference between reading a book to do well in an exam versus reading it for the pure joy of it. If you're extrinsically motivated, you might do something to please somebody else or to avoid their disappointment. It's based on somebody else's agenda. Somebody who you feel has power over you. If you're intrinsically motivated, you may do something because it's internally rewarding, because it's fun, enjoyable or satisfying, because it aligns with your values, or simply for the hedonistic joy of doing it. The second type is whether the motivation is negative or positive. When I say negative, I mean away from, to avoid something that you don't want. And now when I say positive, I mean towards, to achieve something that you do want. And it's worth spending some time to delve into this negative-positive polarity. As human beings, we have between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts in a given day. And for the average person, 80% are negative. Now, there are strong evolutionary reasons for this. When we were hunter-gatherers, we were primed to anticipate threats because of the very real life or death consequences. Now, the world that we live in today is very different. Most of the decisions we make are not life or death, but we retain that negative bias in our thinking. What this means in practice is that we anticipate, or in most cases, imagine threats, which of course influences our behaviour. For most of us, our behaviour has become so habitual, we're not even consciously aware of the thoughts that drive us to do most of the things that we do. We assume that we behave to optimize the opportunities in our life, but more often we behave to minimize the risks. So if you overlay these 2 types of motivation, it gives you your motivation matrix. On the horizontal axis, you have negative to positive, and on the vertical axis, you have extrinsic to intrinsic. Let me take you through each quadrant, and then I'll share with you how you can apply the motivation matrix to changing your own behaviour. Negative extrinsic, negative intrinsic, positive extrinsic, and positive intrinsic. Starting with negative extrinsic. This is fear-based motivation. The fear of looking bad in front of others or not living up to their expectations. It's the fear of disapproval, disappointment, or letting somebody down. In a work context, it may be referred to as stick motivation, the negative consequences of not behaving in a certain way. When I was in my 20s, I had a boss who would regularly tear strips of people who had not performed to his standards. He would humiliate them in front of others. I remember one day him shouting across the office, "Come here, queer." Now, as unacceptable as his behaviour was, it did have a motivating effect on me. I would try to anticipate his reactions, and I spent a lot of time and energy avoiding being the focus of his attention. But here's the interesting thing. I was spending a lot of effort, but I wasn't being effective. When fear kicks in, most of the brain's resources are diverted from evolved capabilities and we switch into survival mode. Fear hijacks our brains. It affects our cognitive ability, our decision making, and our creativity. Although this motivation doesn't motivate us to be our best, the survival instinct is strong and it can help to get us started. Now, moving up to negative intrinsic. So this is also a fear-based motivation, but the stimulus is internal. This digs deep down into our core beliefs and fears that we have about ourselves and who we are. In the 1950s, Will Schutz, an American psychologist, developed FIRO theory. He proposed that human beings have three fundamental needs: the need for inclusion, the need for control, and the need for affection. And behind each of these three fundamental needs lies a primal fear. And they are the fear of being alone, the fear of being a failure, and the fear of being unlovable. So often when I'm coaching people and we dig down into understanding what drives their behaviour, one of these fears or core beliefs pops up. Frequently in the workplace, it's the fear of failure. The problem with these two types of motivation we've spoken about so far is that they're both negative. And this is a problem for two reasons. Firstly, we're focusing on what we don't want, and thinking of this has a negative impact on our mood, our energy, and also our performance. But also, if we're focusing on what we don't want, and we're not paying enough attention to what we do want, well, take the analogy of reversing a car. If you only focus on what it is that you're moving away from and not pay enough attention to what you're moving towards, well, that could end in a nasty accident. So now let's focus on the two types of positive motivation and what it is that you do want. Starting with positive extrinsic. This is where you're motivated because you get an external reward, such as money, status, or power. This is often referred to as the carrot. In a work context, it's interesting how much time and effort is spent incentivizing people with external rewards. The problem with these rewards is that they're like crack cocaine, as in they're transitory and you want more next time. Which brings us on to our final quadrant, positive intrinsic. This is where you do something because it's internally rewarding. You may do it because it's fun, enjoyable, and satisfying. Doing this helps you feel to be in the state that you want to be in more of the time. On our workshops, we call this your thriving state, and we spend a lot of time helping people find their intrinsic motivation and what thriving means for them. This is key to working out what's really important to you and what satisfies your basic psychological needs. Now, these are different for everybody, but in his best-selling book Drive, Dan Pink talks about our intrinsic motivators being a combination of a desire for autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Taking this back into a work context and thinking about how to motivate those around us, this is about helping others to feel in the way that they want to feel more of the time. One of my favourite quotes is from Maya Angelou. "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget the way that you make them feel." We call it making thriving contagious, and it's much more sustainable. The classic carrot rewards for good behaviour in the workplace are money, status, and power. But this is a zero-sum game. Where one person is rewarded, another person loses out. We've seen evidence that the answer is for us to support each other to thrive. This creates a virtuous circle. The more we help others, it helps us. It's sustainable and it's exponential. So my intention in this video is to help you change your behaviour. This is an opportunity to be more aware of what it is that's been holding you back in the past and to set yourself up for success in the future. Although we're all unique, I would say in general, when it comes to motivation, that positive is better than negative because you're focusing on what you do want and not what you don't want. And therefore the direction of travel is clear. Also, it just feels better. And intrinsic is better than extrinsic because you're not relying on others, you're much more self-reliant, and you get to feel the benefits of it daily. To help you get the most from this video, we've created a special Thriving Motivation Matrix for you so that you can do this exercise by yourself. You can download it now to help you build your motivation so that you can change your behaviour more easily. Now I'd love to hear from you. Please leave your comments in the section below. What did you find most useful? What small changes are you going to make, and who would you like to share this with? I look forward to seeing you next month, and in the meantime, be well and thrive.